Well, if you're wondering where Kirby Smart was Friday night on the recruiting of the off week recruiting, it was in New Orleans, Louisiana, to watch Arch Manning play on Friday night. Actually, Mark Schlabach, ESPN, they were all down there to broadcast the game for the world. But it cannot be surprising, at least it's not surprising to me, that Kirby went to New Orleans to check out Newman School and Arch Manning. It shows you just where Georgia thinks they're at. I talked with Kirby earlier this week. I asked him about, uh, you know, this, recruiting period, and there were actually a lot of questions about the recruiting period, and what are you trying to get done this off week? Could he go out and all this stuff? So they had a plan. No surprise there, and it really is not shocking at all that he would go there. It's a decent trip. You've got your head coach. The game's going to be on TV. You get more publicity out of that, but really more than anything, it gives you the ability to cozy up with a five-star kid from a long way away. And it doesn't, it's so hard to know for sure. It doesn't seem like there is a clear-cut leader right now for Manning. It may be Texas, it may be Georgia, but I think really more than anything, what's happening right now is everything's been jumbled up by Ed Orgeron getting fired at LSU. Because now there's just no real telling what's going to happen at LSU. And obviously, you're only an hour away from where you grew up. You could play at LSU and it'd be, easy. Now, that's never been what the Mannings have done. When you look at Peyton going to Tennessee because of David Cutcliffe and Phil Fulmer, you look at Eli going to Ole Miss where his father played. The Rebels are going to have something to say about this by the end of the time too, because there's a real pull there clearly. And Lane Kiffin's trying to take advantage of it this weekend by having the words Manning in the end zones at Ole Miss for the LSU game. So there's a lot of tug and pull here. But what this means to me for Georgia is that they've identified someone in the class of 2023 that they want to sign at quarterback. And I think that, for Georgia, it gives you the ability to possibly sign the number one kid in the country. But if you miss, you already know that you've got a slew of quarterbacks, starting with Carson, and then you go to Brock, and then obviously Gunnar Stockton. 3 in a row there. That's how you have to recruit anymore. I mean, we're at the point where if you're not signing a high-level quarterback, a top, say, 15, 20 quarterback each class, then you really are not doing your program right. The days of one quarterback coming in and saving the program, those are gone. And I thought that was the worst part about the Jacob Eason time at Georgia, was that, and I remember it very clearly, was that people thought that Jacob would come in and save the program, whether that was with Mark Richt as the head coach or Kirby. And that's not how this works. And we've seen that. Trevor Lawrence didn't go 45-0. He won one national championship at Clemson. That's more than Georgia's had the last 40 years, but that's not what you would expect from someone who people call a generational talent. The notion that you have to have any one player, your program isn't where it needs to be if that's the way you're recruiting. So to me, what's happening here is Kirby's saying, hey, look, we would really like to sign Arch Manning. And there's obviously some interest there. He came to Athens in the summer. He came back for the Carolina game. And that, I think, if you talk to folks around the program, that was a big, moment, but that was a moving forward in a way that he wasn't just taking a visit. So I think that Georgia, it sounds like Texas and Georgia are right now neck and neck, but I think the problem with that is there's two problems. Number one, no one really can ever get a straight answer. Okay, this is not the typical recruitment. And then number two, we've got a long way to go, and now with the LSU firing Ed, like my understanding was that Arch was not headed to LSU kind of no matter what. With Ed Orgeron there. But now you've got Ed Orgeron gone. We don't know who it could be. It could be James Franklin. It could be, I doubt it, but it could be, Lane Kiffin. It could be Billy Napier. There's a slew of people that it could be that wind up at LSU that could really jar this thing and change it. People forget that this guy has grown up in New Orleans. He's not from Mississippi. His family has real ties to Ole Miss, but the home state school is a real big draw. It matters a lot. And I think that's the one thing to pay attention to. Sark has done a hell of a job with quarterbacks through the years. So that's one reason why Texas, I think, is in the position it's in. And, Texas is Texas. It's a big deal situation. Georgia's number one team in the country, perhaps number one program in the country. If they're not number one, they're number two. Them and Alabama are fighting one another to the death with that these days. It doesn't look like he's looking at Ohio State. So all the folks in the battleground make sense. I think, to me, if Georgia wants to pull this out, it's going to have to be Kirby and maybe somebody folks aren't really thinking about. When Ole Miss fired their head coach a couple of years ago and brought Lane Kiffin in, that made Matt Luke available. And Kirby Smart went out and got him. He didn't go out and get him for, Arch Manning. But that is something that's really, don't underestimate Matt Luke's connection to the Mannings, because he was the head coach at Ole Miss for however many years. And you can also tell Peyton Manning talks about Kirby Smart too much in a joking way to know otherwise. It's clear that those two know one another in a way beyond just this guy's recruiting my nephew. So you talk about all this stuff, and I've been through this for too long to know with quarterbacks that no one quarterback is a savior. The amount of spotlight, pressure, whatever you want to call it, is dramatic these days. And when you have the last name Manning, it's probably through the roof in a way that I couldn't even, process. Aaron Murray, Matthew Stafford was a huge deal. Matthew Stafford was as big a deal as it was in the 2000s. But back then, everything wasn't as sophisticated with the .coms and recruiting as it is now. Aaron Murray was a really big deal. And when he signed with Georgia, that wasn't shocking. It was supposed to happen, but that he dismissed the Gators. That was a big win for Mark Richt in Georgia. And then, to me, fast forward to Jacob, and the Jacob one is the real, to me, learning moment that people around the SEC have got to have, which is that none of that was Jacob's fault. The expectations on him were insane, completely out of control, and there are no guarantees when you're the quarterback. And I don't. Jacob is, at least Jacob's been through a season starting at Georgia. You get look at guys like Spencer Rattler. It's just DJ Uiagalelei, even Tua at Alabama. So there are we fall so in love with quarterbacks as a society that it's really unfair to your own expectations, nevertheless, the expectations of that child or prospect. But watching everything that Jacob went through, processed, all of it, that has got to be a learning moment for everybody involved. It was for me. I mean, I flew out to see Jacob in the middle of the chaos that was the week Georgia played Kentucky in 2015. And if you do not remember that week, that was the week people thought Jeremy Pruitt had been fired after the Florida game. And it was total chaos. And the Eastons at that moment, did not know what was going on. I did not know what was going on. I did not know what the future would be. I didn't know what the present was at that time. And to think about it that way, and the instability that some of these schools have. I mean, LSU would be hiring a new head coach. There's no certainty that Lane Kiffin would stick around. I think with Sark and with Kirby, yeah, they're going to be there for a little bit of time. Kirby will be for sure. And Sarkisian just got there. So I just, all of the moving parts. Who are the quarterbacks that are there already? It's nothing like any other position. And having the last name Manning is as synonymous with playing quarterback in this country as anyone else, maybe besides Brady, who does not yet have a son that's being recruited. My heart goes out to them in many ways. I mean, the Mannings have certainly know how to handle things and all that stuff, but this guy, it is impossible to know the life that he's having to live. Not only, being it's one thing being a 5-star quarterback. Trevor, Justin, these guys go through it, you see it, and it's a lot. To add all the other stuff that's going on with the last name and the expectations, that's a ton. And we're just going to see. I mean, Kirby, I think, thinks that they're in really good shape, or he wouldn't be out there. Now, you can be in really good shape and not sign a kid, but this is Kirby Smart we're talking about here. We'll see you on the website.